I know, at least I, for one, I'm really, really interested in the project. I mean, ever from, the first time I saw it, I mean, it was it's like, wow. And now even when you're kind of branching out of New South Wales and South Australia and whatnot, that's even better. And I was down the Limestone Coast last year, and hence my questions on the Facebook group the other day, or a month ago now, whatever now.
That's right. Yep.
Maps on that area, which is awesome. So I reckon, yeah, let's hand it over to you, and then we'll just go from there.
All right. Well, my name's Tom. I started GetLostMaps 3 or so years ago. I bought the domain, I think, getlost.com.au maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, just because it seemed cool that I could have an email address at getlost.com.au. I thought that'd be something that's easy to remember. And so I really didn't have, I used it for half a dozen different things and sort of put it to the side and just used it for my email for a while. And I've always been into full driving and camping, and I've got a 2008 Patrol and a DR650 that I do a bit of adventure riding on as well when I get around to it. But I've always been out in the bush, and I'm in Victoria, same as you guys. I mean, I've been into mapping as well. That's always been a thing that's really interested me. I've been into digital mapping as well for a long time. So, I mean, I started mapping as kind of a teenager. I was a scout and into all that sort of stuff, and hiking and four-wheel driving as soon as I could drive, but hiking and canoeing and stuff before that. And I used to get around with a bloke named Rudy, who some of you may or may not know, who made the Adventurer series of maps. And when I was a teenager, I used to get out in the bush with Rudy and his mates, and we would do the field survey stuff for the Adventurer maps, which you can still get today for, if you're up around the Woods Point down to Walhalla region. There are a good series of maps that cover that area in really high detail, and with a lot of emphasis on historical stuff. So old mines and old towns and that kind of thing. And that's honestly, that's like a big interest of mine as well. When I'm out bush, I'm bashing down the creeks looking for old boilers and old mines and things like that too, old town sites and building sites. So that was kind of my background, and I used a variety of different maps to sort of get around, to explore. I had the old fire maps that the CFA used to use back in the 90s. They put them out as a series. I think they gave them out to CFAs as a series of PDF map files. That's been replaced relatively recently, and the replacement of that is the thing you'll see on the Emergency Vic app. You'll see as the background of that. So that's the Victorian base map. But certainly the old maps, and even the current ones, didn't ever have all of the stuff that I was interested in seeing on them. On top of that, they always charge for them. So if you want to buy Victorian maps from the Victorian government using Victorian government data, they sell them to you, but they will not give them to you. So that was a bit of a peeve. The getting hold of the base map that they use for the Emergency Vic app and that sort of stuff, I don't think legally you're supposed to be able to download that. There are ways, but even then, it doesn't have all the information on it that I was interested in. So it didn't really fulfill. It didn't have a whole lot of historical information on it that I was interested in. It didn't have. It doesn't have seasonal road closures and stuff, which change every year. It doesn't have all the huts, which is the sort of thing that if I'm going past one, I'll detour off to have a bit of a look at it because I'm interested in those. And that information is always changing because they burn down and they get rebuilt and whatever. So you pick up a map that's 3 years old and it could well be wrong. The seasonal road closures change every year, believe it or not, and they change. Even the signs when you're out in the bush are not up to date so far as what roads are actually seasonally closed, because the closures change more frequently than the signage does. So I've been to a few places where there's a big sign that says this road is seasonally closed, and I'm pulling out the data and I'm like, this road hasn't been a seasonal closure since 2017. I can go down here. This is fine. So, which is good. And then I go down the end of it and there's no one down there because everybody thinks it's closed except people have got these maps. So that's a bit handy. Anyway, so in various areas up in the high country, I might be 20 plus maps deep. So I might be able to zoom in and out and change through different layers of maps, depending on what I want to see and whether I want a small scale or a large scale map, or whether I want to see a scanned black and white from the 50s or a sketch or whatever. I could be a couple of dozen different maps deep and scrolling through them all. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of combine all that down and put as much information as I could on one map, so I wouldn't have to shift as much, and then kind of find a sweet spot where it was as useful as it could be without being too overpowering, because you can put too much stuff on a map, and that's something that I found that I've been mucking around over the past few years, and I've made mistakes and put too much stuff on, and then I've had to take stuff off because it gets too busy and you can't really use it, and then I find that I can use it where I go and some other blokes somewhere else using the same data but in a different spot, and it's way too busy and you can't use it at all. So, I mean, at some point I've got to kind of pick a happy medium and go with that, but I'm always sort of mucking around with it to see if I can find a better balance and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I was looking for a free set of maps which had all of the data that I would want to go bush for a weekend or a week up in the high country, essentially, because that's mainly what I use it for. Up in the Central Highlands, because I live in the Dandenongs, so I'll go out into the Central Highlands, out sort of Nuji way, and then sort of north and northeast of there, and we'll zigzag through the mountains until I get to Lucola or I get to Dargo, it depends how long I've got. And I wanted a map which would take me all the way through there. And that's what I couldn't find. Certainly I couldn't find free, but I actually couldn't find it even paying for it with all the information that I wanted on it. And so I started mucking around to see what information was available, and I found Victoria is actually pretty good with the type of data that the Victorian government provides for free. If you know where to look in their big data warehouse, you can log in and pull out reams of information that the government uses. And so I started with that. And then I added other sources of information and spoke to other people about where they get their information that they use for geological surveys and for historical type stuff, or from there's a bunch of blokes who do fishing and have some specific fishing information. There's a whole lot of hunting type data. There's information. What are the other sources? There's about Victoria, I think, uses 6 or 7 different sources of information, of large plus the odd little bit here and there that's gone into it. Some states, Western Australia, have only really got 1 and a bit sources. Northern Territory got a couple.
Wouldn't it be hard to get access? How do you get access to that? Is that
most of it?
That must be.
Yeah, it's a bit of some of it is all about timing. So, for example, Victoria was quite ahead of the curve in their open data policies, government policies about giving public access to government information. And so they had most of the data that I need, not all of it, but most of it was there at the start 3 years ago. But when I first did it 3 years ago and pulled all, for example, just like road and track data from Victoria, you couldn't get New South Wales road and track data 3 years ago. You could in fact only get it maybe 1 year ago, because they were just catching up. And there were ways to get it, and there were ways to get old data sets, Commonwealth data sets and things. And you'll find that most people use, sometimes you'll see a little reference to, what do they call it, Geosciences Australia or something. And Geosciences, that's really common for people to say that their track road data comes from Geosciences Australia. And that generally means it's about 10 years old, which is, I mean, it's fine for a bitumen road, to get me from here to Dargo. That's great. But if I want a newer track, or a track that's been closed, or, stuff like that, or some dodgy little, goat track that was open and then closed and then open, and then they put a bulldozer through it and then it was really good, and then they gated it and shut it again. That sort of information you can't get that. It's really hard to find. So I've got I tapped into a bit of that information and I got hold of it, and then I added some open source information from like OpenStreetMaps and things like that. And I couldn't, because all of the data, I'll show you this in a second, because it doesn't, essentially none of it's true and all of it's wrong. And so I basically just put it all on and I let you figure it out because because rather than flipping through 3 different maps from 3 different sources, wherever possible, I'll just put 2 different tracks on there in different colors. And when you go there, you'll work out which one's real and which one's not, because I can't. And I certainly can't tell on a per data set level. Like if I went to the satellite image, I might be able to go, okay, that one's wrong and that one's right, and like manually scrub it out. But I've got 7.5 million square kilometers of maps now, and it's just not possible.
That's virtually impossible, right? Yeah.
So
I was wondering, how did you go about actually discerning what information goes where and what actually to use with more on the start, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got lots of different maps to use as kind of a base to get a feel of it. And I was a naval officer, and I'm familiar with marine navigation and stuff as well. And I've used maps and charts from a variety of different angles. And then at some stage, you just kind of try and balance getting as much information on as you can without it being overpowering. And it's an art, and I'm not actually very good at it. It's getting better. Occasionally it gets worse, and then it gets better again. But
I think I can speak for all of us.
It is
from what we see, it's all.
It's getting better, and I make mistakes with it, but you downloaded. You can download. One of the core things was that I needed it to be free, because I don't like paying for this information. I don't buy the data. I won't pay for it, which is why I don't have very good data for Western Australia, because the Western Australian government will not give you their data. They will make you buy it. And so I won't map it, because I can't get it for free. And once I can get it for free, I will map it. And it's as simple as that. New South Wales was the same until they released their data into their free portal. I didn't do New South Wales. I waited until it was released, and then I've done New South Wales. And now New South Wales, I've got three sources of road and track data. I think Queensland's got 3 and a bit as well. But I can show you some of the problems if you're interested. Queensland's a good example, because like Victoria, the government data is actually pretty good. It's about 90% of the way there. And then you add the OpenStreetMap data, and then you're about 97% of the way there. And then some of it is just wrong, and you manually fix it. Queensland's terrible. Their state government data is like 60% of their roads, and the OpenStreetMap data is maybe 50% of the roads. And then they've got a separate government data set that's maybe 40%, and you have to put it all in together. Otherwise, you couldn't get from A to B. It's just shocking, just absolutely terrible.
Jeez, that does not sound very good.
So I've just put it all on there, and by the time you've put it all together, you can sort of get across, and you've probably got 90% of the tracks that are actually there in real life, 95% of the tracks, I hope. Queensland's a fair way away for me to test at the moment, but next time I'm there, I'll check it out. Victoria, even I can only go 5Ks from home, so I can't even test it out here at the moment. But
yeah, I think we're all waiting for lockdown to ease, right? I can't wait to get out there again.
Yeah, I reckon. So if you like, I will. I'll share my screen, and I'll show you a couple of little bits and pieces, just so you can get a feel for where it's all come from, and hopefully this will give you just enough understanding that how you might be able to provide me better information, so that I can make it better. Because I'm always interested in more data and more information, and some stuff some stuff the only way I'm going to know if X, hut fell down last Thursday is if I read it on a Facebook post, or Kosciuszko Huts Association deigns to publish a post about it, or something like that. There just isn't a core place to find out this information.
Yeah, part of it's also crowdsourcing it in some ways, right? So, easy way to do that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And occasionally someone will give me a big set of, here's all the campsites where I've camped over the past, 5 years or whatever, and here's all of the huts that I've been to, including exactly where they are, because I went out with my GPS and actually marked it. Because some of the huts that I've got, that was an example. I couldn't find a data set of huts, like a thing that you could put in your GPS, which had all of the huts of the Victorian High Country. The Kosciuszko Huts, Kosciuszko Huts Association, has a data set which is about 90% accurate. It's up to date, but a lot of it's wrong, and it doesn't go right across Victoria either. So it's a bit iffy, and it's not published. It's not public. You have to be a member to get hold of it. So I couldn't get a set of Victorian high country huts, and the government data had what they said was a set, and there was about 60% of the huts on it. It was just terrible. And it wasn't up to date because the whole lot of things that had burnt down and fallen down were wrong. So I mean, that was a good example. That's something that I'm interested in looking at, and I just couldn't get hold of the information, and it shipped me to tears. Why can't I? These are on public land. They're ostensibly public resources, and nobody can even give me a list of them. So
wow.
I've created
it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't be that hard.
So now I've got a full data set of them, which is as accurate as I can make it, and it's on the website, and you can download it and do what you want with it, and you can put it in your GPS or your phone, or you can do whatever you like with it. It's the best information that I've got about where every single hut is and which ones are burned down, and a little bit about their history, where I've got it, when it was built, when it burned down, when it was rebuilt, stuff like that. Because there's sort of questions, that people ask when they get to some bush hut. But it's on the website now. You can download it, and that's even separate from the maps. So they're on the maps, but you can just download the data if you want and do what you want with it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So if I share my screen, I'll show you a couple of little. I think I need to press this. Let me know if this is.
So that's suspenseful
Here
music.
we go. Yeah, sorry, drum roll. All right. Can you see my screen?
Got it.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Okay, so that's my little monster. 2008 with 4 inches, and it's been good so far.
Oh, nice. And it's a Nissan, even better.
Exactly. Yeah. If it was a Toyota or something, I wouldn't have shown you. So
that's a lot of smiles with the other guys here. So that's a good time.
So that's what I use to get out and about most of the time. If the weather's good, then I'll go for a bit of a spin on this instead, and get out where I can. I'll camp out off the bike and stuff as well.
Nice.
So that's inside. So I've got just a Chinese Android head unit, which is worth about $150 off eBay. And that's running, I just installed that like 2 days ago. I had a 7-inch one, and that's a 9-inch one. So I just installed that the other day, and that's running OziExplorer because it's an Android. It's basically an Android tablet with a little amplifier behind it, essentially. So that's how I generally roll when I'm out bush, like that, with that unit running. And that's got a USB stick, 128 gigabyte USB stick, which is chock full of maps. It's got all of the maps of wherever I'm going at the time. And then it's got other mapping apps and Google Maps and all that sort of stuff that I can use if I want to as well. So if you haven't seen GetLostMaps, this is roughly what the 1 to 250,000 scale looks like. So
yeah, that's the live version. Yeah, I haven't actually played too much around with that. That's actually really good.
Yeah, so I mean, I can pull the actual 250 maps if you like, and I'll show you in a second, but it looks roughly like this. The live one's just easier for me to scroll backwards and forwards. So this scale here is about 1 to 250,000. And this is in flux at the moment because I'm still generating the maps that go onto here. But this also allows me to kind of muck around and select an area and do some changes and then spit them out as a map and have a look at what they actually look like. So if I zoom in a bit, a 1 to 75,000, that's just an artifact. A 1 to 75,000 looks about like that. So it's got index contours, 100-meter contours here. This area here is just the other side of, so we've got Marysville on the left there and Lake Mountain to the south. So this is just an example of where to go. And that's Keppel Hut there. I think Keppel's Hut in the middle, if you know that area at all. You can drive along this road here, this one up here. I don't know if you can you see my mouse as well or not?
Yep, it's all good.
Yep. Yeah, so this McFadden track, you can drive along that. That's a cool little track to drive along. The fact that it's pink in this means it's a seasonally closed road, so you can't drive on it right now. But after November, you can drive along this road here, and it's not gated either. The gate, I think, opens, and you can drive into right near this hut and out along here. And then 1 to 25,000 looks a bit more like that, and it's in Victoria. I've got the whole state is available at 1 to 25,000. So at this,
that is amazing. That's just crazy good.
So that's, I mean, and now you can see a bit more detail. Seasonal road closure, it actually tells you, the dates of the road closure from the 11th of June to the 29th of October. That's up to date. So that's based on, I get that data from a contact that I've got in DELP every year. So every time they change the tracks and they change the dates, you might or might not be aware that seasonally closed tracks don't all close on the same date, and they don't all open on the same date. There are certain tracks that are closed for an extra month. Yep. And don't open until 1st of December, and there are tracks that close in May, and there are tracks that close in June. So yep. there's a variety, and what really annoys me is going out to a thing that I reckon, I've still got another week before the gate's closed, and you get out there and the gate's already closed, and not because it's already been closed for weeks. So or it doesn't open. Up in the Thompson catchment, there's a bunch that are closed, I think, for an extra month at the end of the season, and that used to trick me occasionally. So anyway, so the dates and stuff are on here too. Yeah, anyway, so that gives you an idea of a feel for the maps if you haven't seen them. That's the sort of level of detail that's on them, basically.
I think that's when I started looking at it, that level of detail was really what really interested me, because it was really hard getting granular level detailed maps, right? Unless paying through the nose to get them. So I mean that was one thing that I got really interested in first when I saw this stuff. So
yeah, and I hope they're useful. I mean, I need them when I go out, so I figure if I'm generating them for myself, that's where this all came from. Initially, I just wanted to make them for myself, and then when I realised that I'd made a whole set, I figured I might as well just put them somewhere so everybody else could have them as well if they wanted them, and that's essentially what I'm still doing.
So how much effort is it to kind of create the maps? Is that really a laborsome process to kind of get to this level of detail? I mean,
yeah, it's. I mean, initially, it's probably about, I don't know, for us to set up a state, it's probably a few hundred hours to set up the state to start with, and then each time you update them, it's about another. It takes a few days per state to update them as the data refreshes, because once I've done it once, then I've probably got access to that data, and the data itself refreshes, and so then I've got to look at how much it's changed and how relevant that is, and then update the refresh it, basically pull out the old tracks and put in new ones.
Yeah, got it.
To show the changes. Or in the case of Victoria, and it's specific to Victoria, have to do it every year, at least every year, just to do the seasonal road closures, because they change. And then each time I'm refreshing it, I think basically I refresh it every. I mean, the aim was to do it at least twice a year. Victoria, I'd probably do about 4 or 5 times a year, maybe 6, depending on what's happening. It depends on.
It seems very frequent. I mean, I say it's like almost every time I check, wow, there's a new version coming. Like,
yeah,
wow.
And you don't have to update them every time if you've already got. If you've got the maps you want, then you don't have to update them. You can just roll with the old maps. That's fine. But I mean, I'm trying to improve them as well. So that's part of it. So I mean, what you're looking at right now is actually a recent refresh, and I can tell that it's recent because if I look closely at that track, it's got a little bit of white behind the track. To make it pop, to make it stand out slightly better against the background. And that's something that I only just recently did. So I know that this is actually a recent refresh, this particular area. Whereas, if I go over here somewhere, it doesn't have any white behind the track over there.
Got it.
So that it is getting better, and it's meant to, little things like that don't make much difference. Maybe it's not worth downloading 15 gigs worth of maps just to get that, but the next time the maps get refreshed for some other purpose, hopefully all of a sudden the tracks will be a little bit easier to see because of little tricks like that I've stolen off someone else or just thought of or whatever. This here shows you a good example of multiple sources of track data. So you've got, they don't line up properly. You've got that little purple line there, that's OpenStreetMaps data from someone's actual GPS tracing. And the other one there is Victorian government data, the other track. They sometimes line up and they sometimes don't. This particular zoom gives you an example of some of the other data that's kind of stuffed in there. So OG here, that's an old growth forest there. That's old growth forest. All in here, OG is old growth forest. Whereas LL 1985, so that area, that's last logged. So that area was logged in 1985. So when you're driving through there looking out at the trees going, these trees look pretty good. Those trees have only been there since about 1986.
I wasn't aware of that. I haven't. I missed that point. Yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's just, I find that interesting because I'm always looking out going, geez, this forest is, you know, it's looking pretty healthy and pretty sweet. And I wonder how old it is. And now I'll pull up my own map to have a bit of a look. You know, this bit over here was last logged in 1971, you know, and this bit over here is 1985. If I find somewhere that was last logged in, you know, 2019, I'm not going to go there expecting to find that campsite that down by the river that I used to love is still worth going to.
Good point. Yeah, really good point. Yeah.
Probably had a bulldozer through it, you know, last year, and it could, you know, it might still be gated or it might just be a big boggy mess. These ruins and things too. So these are often old huts. Where I know what the ruin is, I'll often put what the ruin is. I think that's an old hut off the top of my head. There's not much there anymore. There's mines and things on this, not in this area, but old gold mines and things like that are on here as well, if you're interested in bush bashing around and finding such things. Anyway, so just to give you a bit of an example of how it all works. So if I was going to, one of the things I want to put on the map, and I had it for a while and it got a bit messy and then I took it off again. But one of the things I wanted to put on was tree cover. And I've got a couple of sources of data for tree cover so that you know which areas are forest and which areas are not. There's a couple of reasons I might look for that. One, if I'm looking for shade, so I might want a forested area. Depends where you are. Some places you just assume it's all forest, but other places not so much. So if I wanted to add a forest layer, I'm looking for an icon, and I was doing this before, looking for an icon to put in as a forest, and I narrowed it down and I found a few different icons that I could use as a forest background layer. And there are proprietary ones and things like that, and I'm only using free ones, so that's part of the trick. Now, if I just, I'll do. Now, can you see that the map? Yeah. Excuse me. But I've just cycled through. I don't know if you can see what I'm looking at now. So I'm looking at QGIS, which is the software that I use to make the maps. Is that what's showing on screen?
Oh, yes. Actually, I was wondering about that, what you were using to actually do this. Yeah, and I was
that. So this is QGIS. You might have heard of ArcGIS. That's probably the most commonly used commercial GIS, which is geographical information system. Anyway, it's something like that, GIS. So that's ArcGIS is probably the most popular one commercially, but it costs a lot of money, like $1,000, $1,500 probably to get a license for ArcGIS. Wow. So this is QGIS, which is an open source free alternative and does many of the things as well as it does them. It does some things just as well and other things not quite as well, but it does the job. It's made all the maps so far. This gives you an idea of kind of how the maps are built. So this is live. This is a live set of data. This is literally, if I change something in here, then next time I spit the maps out, this is where it all is. And down the side here, you can get a feel for the data that goes into it. So that's just, so Victoria. So that's Victoria, it starts there. And these are the layers in Victoria. So these are just the point layers. Some of these are Victorian government layers, and some of them are not. So these are just the points. What's that? The fire towers and radio towers and some springs and ruins and mines.
Wow.
I don't know, toilets and caves and picnic tables and whatever else. So that's point data. I've got line data here. Various types of roads, obviously the seasonal closures. Some seasonal closures in Victoria, some of them are the seasonal ones done by DELP, and some of them I had to put in manually because they're done by local governments. Like, for example, the road between Jamison and Lacola, that's a local government closure. And if you go to the site which gives you the list of seasonal closures, the one on DELP, that won't be on there because it's not a DELP closure, it's a local government closure.
Yeah, you know, a bit miffed about that. Had permits this winter to do that one and run a club trip up that way, but that didn't happen. So
yeah, exactly. And that's a bit of a trick for people who, because you won't necessarily, unless you look on the map which has that information, you won't know that it's closed. Because even if you look up the seasonal road closures, you know, there's a big PDF of road names and whatever, which is not, and I think they might provide a map of it as well. The DELP seasonal road closures doesn't include that because they didn't close it. Same with the road above Falls Creek, the road that goes up, you know, around Rocky Valley Dam and over that. That's a local government closure as well.
Got it. Yeah.
Then there are others. There are these others. So all the ones over Buffalo, there's a bunch of tracks up there which are closed technically by national parks, but do not get included for some reason in the data that comes out of the seasonal road closed data. Don't ask me why. I just found that it was a gap and they're not there, so I had to put them in manually. Donna Buang Falls, that's that Jamison Lacola Road. So they're manual ones I've put in, and there's some more. And then there's the data set that I get from DELP, which they don't actually publish. And every year I have to email the bloke and ask him for it.
And I can see there's a fair amount of effort going into this. It's I was always wondering how the heck are you doing this? And it's like, you know, it's a fair amount of data, especially when you're talking about doing it nationwide as well eventually. So
yeah, so it's, I mean, Victoria was easier. Getting hold of this data and making contacts with government people was harder for some of the other states. Partly because I don't live there, so I don't have an in, and so I've got to track down the person to get the information from, because some of it is, like, it is freely available, but only if you work out who to ask for it, and then they can be bothered giving it to you. Then it's freely available. Otherwise, I mean, it's only freely available in name. So yeah, so that gives you some idea of some of the data. That's just for Victoria, that data there, and then I've got the other states in here as well. That's so I can switch off different states, switch them on and off, depending on whether I'm just producing a state series or because they're all different. This New South Wales has a fully separate set of points, and there's not an overlap, and the quality of them is different, and what is covered is different. What features they've bothered to map are different. How they map it, which government entity holds that data is different. Like in Victoria, there's a core set of gate information, which might sound, you know, pretty boring, except for then if you try and find that for New South Wales, it doesn't exist. They don't have that level of information. They can't tell you where all their gates are. You have to contact individual regions within.
Yeah, that seems tedious.
It's just, so anyway, it's stuff like that. It just becomes a bit of a pain, and that's just changing from one state to one other state, and then that's different again in Queensland, and it's different again in South Australia. And the other thing is names change. So a state forest in Victoria is not the same as a state forest in New South Wales. Actually, they're more similar than most, but South Australia, for example, doesn't have the same system. You can't do the same things in the state forest. So, for example, if you've got a state forest in South Australia, which is effectively a fenced-off logging area that you're not allowed to drive through all year, should I map that the same way as I map a state forest in Victoria, which is basically an open forest that you can do whatever you like in, except when they happen to be logging that bit, or should I map it differently because it's purposefully different. Do you know what I mean? Like it's got the same name, but it doesn't actually have the same purpose. So should I map it so they look the same, or is that confusing? These are things that came up when I tried to change states.
How do you have time to basically do all of this? I mean, it takes a bit of fair effort on your end to do all of it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes as long as it takes. I do a bit at a time, and then I do a bit more, and then I find out something else, or someone tells me, that's different here, or I don't know, something like that, and then I go back and change it. So I put in some hours kind of every week, if not every day. I do a little bit of something on it, change something on it. So this has got fire information on it, for example. I don't have that for the whole country, but I do have it for New South Wales and Victoria, I think, the bushfire information. So, for example, in the same sort of way as I was saying before, you might be interested to know which area had just been logged. If you're about to drive there and find your favourite campsite, you might also be interested to know that, this area here had a planned burn in 2019. So if your favourite campsite was in there, it might not be there anymore. Or a bushfire went through it recently, that sort of stuff. So once you zoom in a bit and you get the bigger scale maps, there's more and more information as you go in. And where you draw the line, how much you can't put all the information in, when you zoom right out, because it's too much. And where you draw the line is kind of arbitrary. I hadn't thought
about actually just what you said there, right? I mean, my workflow in terms of how I use the maps, but I mean, just that little point that you said there, right? I mean, that's definitely something that I'll take forward. I mean, just understanding the level of detail and how it applies, really. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's something that you think I've got wrong, that you reckon is, should be more, there's information that I don't have, or there's information that, you really need that I haven't thought of, I'm always open to people. Some people will give me sets of data or point me at where the data is, or just let me know, here's an idea. Have you thought of putting this in there? Stuff like that. And maybe I haven't, because I don't really use that information, but then I'll look at, can I put it in without it overpowering everything else, or, and at what level of zoom can I put it in, stuff like that. And if I can put it in, then I will, because the more people who can use the map, the better, basically. That's all good. So far, we've had about just shy of 20 million maps downloaded.
Wow.
And that's, so it might actually be 20 million now. And that's over the last 3 years.
Another thing I think people, wondering about, how do you finance this? I mean, it's not free, right? So I mean, it's blood, sweat, and tears on your end, but I mean, there's probably more to it than just that, right?
Yeah, I mean, people have given me money. People have donated money and time and assistance, and all manner of other bits and pieces. So the bloke who makes OziExplorer, this is OziExplorer here, and this is the PC version of the thing that I run in my car. So he gives me a free license. He didn't at the start, but now he does. He'll give me, now when I got my new head unit the other day, I don't have to pay him the $30 or whatever it is, $35 to relicense it, which is handy, because that's $35 I don't have to spend on that. And that's the thing that I use when I'm out bush mapping, basically. There are other ways you can do it, but that's kind of what I've been using this since the 90s, and it's easy, and it works on multiple platforms and things like that. So it's one that I recommend to people. But the people give me money for the hosting and things. So the website is hosted. There are data usage costs and things as well. And I ran out of nodes on my server, and now I've got to get a bigger server or something because I had too many files on it, stuff like that. I'm reasonably technology savvy, but I'm not a professional IT person. So some of that stuff costs me money in getting advice sometimes, and then there are just ongoing costs for services and things. And the thing that you're looking at right now, the PC that this is running on, this computer doesn't do anything except mapping. It's just sits here running, spitting out maps 24/7. Wow. So it was bought specifically for that, and I got a good deal on it, but it still cost, I don't know, $1,000 or $1,500 or something. And all it does is mapping, and it just sits here on the desk using power and data and
yeah, that's I mean, I have no issue, contributing to a project like this. I mean, that's and I've done that in small slice, but I'll probably do that going forward as well. But I mean, that's why I said blood, sweat, and tears. But I mean, ultimately, there are other things as well, right? Especially the financial cost in doing this, especially as the project grows, it has a tendency to grow as well, right? So.
Yeah, and it grows beyond, what people will pay for, because there's different levels of quality in the maps. Like, and I'm the first to admit that, you can download the maps of Western Australia right now if you want, but I really did Western Australia just for completeness. There's not actually that much information on them that you can't find elsewhere. Northern Territory's a bit better, South Australia's better, Queensland's better in that level, in that order. And Victoria, luckily for us, Victoria's got the best information in it. So this is when I was saying that I might have a couple of dozen levels of maps at any given location. So that's one particular point in Victoria, somewhere around there. And there are all of the maps that I am currently running on this PC to cover that particular area. Satellite maps and things as well. So this is the live 25,000 GetLost map. The data that goes into that. So apparently I need to go here and work out if there's a hut there, because I don't know if there's a hut there or not. Does anybody know if there's a hut there? Rigo's hut.
Gary, you guys are probably out there for a bit.
It's near Tali Khan. It's a Wriggles hut site. But apparently somewhere near there's the site of an old hut, which this is up near Arbuckle Junction. So there's Miller's hut down the bottom here. Apparently built in.
Yeah, I was actually excited to go up there.
Tali Khan.
Yep.
And Miller's hut was there still a few years ago.
Yeah. So it was built in 1916 and then done up again in 1987, according to that, and it hasn't burnt down, which is good at last report. But Wriggles hut apparently is somewhere around here, and there's the site of an old hut, and I don't know exactly where it is, but I don't know. Next time I'm up that way, I'll find out, I suppose, unless someone tells me before I work it out for myself.
I don't think it's in sight of the road.
No, it could be just off the road.
A lot of people park there to take the walk. Oh,
I know where you're talking about. You're talking about just a little bit further north. There's just a bit further north here. Wellington track is Farland. So that's not actually a hut. So there's a ruined Dunsmuir. I think you can kind of crawl into Dunsmuir hut now. But this is a walking track. This is the Tali Khan walking track. And this is where you're parking. This is where you're talking about here, this car park. So that's where it says McFarlane hut there. That's data that someone gave me, which said there was a hut there. And I kind of said, really? I've been near there several times and never seen a hut. And after a bunch of research, found out that there's actually a ruin of a hut somewhere in the scrub there. And anyway, I don't know exactly where that is, but apparently it's about there. Yeah, but I mean, again, this is that purple bit there. That's from OpenStreetMaps. This red bit here is from Victorian government. This red bit here, where I've written overgrown, I've written that because you literally could not walk along that. There's nothing there. It's just decorative. Victorian government data is just, you cannot drive along that. You can barely see this intersection here where it joins the track. I happen to know. It's just not there. Anyway,
sometimes I'll just let the tracks go back. And it's only when there's a fire they're trying to deal with that they'll use the old track. Put a D4 down there to clean it out, so they can track us down.
Yeah, and it could also be that it burnt and then it was regrowth too. So it says it was logged in 1964, but that regrowth is much newer than that from my memory. That bit, as an example, this bit here burnt more recently, but yeah. Anyway. It gives you a feel for it. So what I was going to do is just show you this quickly. So I was going to put a forest layer on. Where is it? Where was my forest? I was going to use this one. So if I zoom in a bit, okay, so that's an idea for a forest. Now, I'm not happy with the way that looks because it's a bit in your face and overpowering everything else, but there are lots of different ways of putting forest layers in, forest coverage layers, and some of them are good and some of them are not. So if I find a spot, here's my GetLostMap, which doesn't have a forest layer. If I swap to, here's an idea. Okay, so here's an example of a problem. So this is a random bit of bush not far from where I live. And this is the satellite map, which you would think is pretty handy and has the most information on it because it's a satellite picture, right? So this, you might be tempted to think this has the most information that you could possibly get on a map. But there's a bunch of information that until you swap to this, you can't actually tell is missing. So this is the GetLost map of this area. This is actually an older GetLost map, but there's a ruin in here and there's a track apparently there and there and whatever. And then this is the edge of the government controlled land. So if I swap to OpenStreetMaps, there's a bunch of information missing. For example, I can't tell where the state government land starts and stops easily because all the shading is the same. They've got a forest layer. So this is what OpenStreetMaps calls scrub, those little icons there. And then this is what they call forest. So that's helpful. That's a different level of information. But I can't use this because, one, it doesn't have the same information on it. It doesn't have the tracks. So it's got this sunset track on it. But if I swap back to here, it doesn't have this track on it. And I know that track is there. So, and it doesn't show clearly where the government land, where the state and the private land is. So that's not particularly helpful. Google Maps is better in some ways and not better in others. So it's much more clear about where this private land is, but it doesn't have that track on it. And it doesn't have the forest cover on it. If I go to the thing I was talking about before, this is the Victorian government data. This is what your CFA is using when they rock up to your house out here. It doesn't have that track on it either. It is clear about where the government land and the private land is, which is good. But there's symbology here. You can see here they've got their forest cover. The forest cover works really well with this shading. So that's grass in the middle, and then that's forest around the edge. And you can, swap to here. Let's swap to here. You can see what they're trying to demonstrate. There's a big grassy bit up the middle, and there's forest around the edge. So that's good. And this matches that. So that's not bad from a, if I was going to represent forest, I could kind of copy that, except that when you go over here, I can't see what's going on because the shading, there's not enough contrast in it. So, it works against the light background, but it doesn't work against the dark background. So this is a problem this is the Victorian government's base map system, and it's got a symbology problem because I can't see.
Gets complex really quick, yeah, and I get it.
I can't tell. So if I was trying to work out how I was going to represent forest, I can do it like that, for example. I can go to the same spot as that. I can try and represent it. I can try and copy one of those or another one of those and see how they represent it, but none of them have actually done it particularly well. Do you know what I mean? So then I'm left trying to reinvent or find my own balance point as to how I can represent that. And then I might spend a whole lot of time putting forest, tree cover basically on the map, only to find that once I do that, it overpowers a whole lot of other information, which is actually more important. And then I'll just strip it all out and get rid of it again.
Wow.
Because
that's really cool. And I guess
it didn't work. And I can't really tell until I muck around with it. And then there are issues with the data as well. So this is that same area. So there should be a stripe of non-trees down the middle there. Just there. There's kind of a stripe there I can see in this data.
Yeah.
I mucked around with this before. It's got a double layer of data down here in the corner. So see how that's darker and that's lighter? It's because there's an error in the data where they've put the same data in covering the same area twice. And so because I've used a transparency, which is like, 80% transparent, 20% visible, it's put it in twice. And so it's made that area 40% visible instead of 20% visible. And so the only way to fix that is for me to go into the table in the data set and actually find that and rip it out, because otherwise I can't discriminate. I can't get rid of that in any other way. And the only way I would know that is if it was an area that I was looking at, because otherwise, I've got 7.8 million square kilometers where this could be happening, and I have no idea what it's doing in the middle of the desert. It could be doing this. It could be only doing it here, or it could be doing it all over the place, and I wouldn't have any idea until somebody, looks at that particular map, because I don't visibly check all of those maps. There are 4,500 map sheets.
There's no way you can get across all of that. No, I get it. Oh, wow.
Look at them all. Anyway, so that gives you some idea of like one of the problems. I'm not happy with this. It's a bit too obtrusive. I don't know if it's the icon that's wrong. I don't know if it needs to be faded back a bit. I'll keep mucking around with it. I didn't like how I did it last time. I got rid of it. I don't like how it's working this time, so I'll get rid of it again, and I'll try something else. And once I'm happy with it, then one of these days it'll come out on the map. Or I'll never be happy with it, and it won't ever come out on the map. So hopefully that gives you some idea. That's what I'm talking about. I'll sit down and I'll muck around for a few hours of trying to get it to work, and if it doesn't work, I might leave it alone and try and get something else to work instead.
Yeah, no, I got it. No, I mean, to me, I mean, this has been really, really good. I mean, the other guys, I mean, if you have any questions or comments, right? I mean, but I'm loving the project and what you do, right? So all kudos to you. That's for sure. I'm just being cognizant a bit on time as well. I think we're way over, but I mean, for us, it's at least super interesting. But
sorry, I wasn't even watching.
Yeah, one question, if you don't mind, Tom, because you said you use OziExplorer, and that's kind of your go-to. I use your maps through Avenza.
Yes. Yep.
Have you had any comments or feedback? Do you know any kind of major difference? Because I don't have a lot of experience with the mapping with that kind of the differences between the software. Are there particular features that drew you to OziExplorer?
Only because I suppose the OziExplorer one's a bit more interactive. You can see all the tools and stuff it's got up here. So Avenza OziExplorer is a little bit more geared towards making maps, I suppose, in some ways. Not really, but it does a few other things. It's a bit more full featured. Avenza is about making it. First of all, it works on iOS, and OziExplorer only works on Android. So if you've got an iPhone or an iPad, then you're not going to be able to use OziExplorer.
Yeah.
That's probably the main thing.
Okay.
Avenza is a bit easier to use because you download the maps within the app itself instead of having to download them separately and then sort of copy them onto your phone, which is an extra step. Depends how comfortable you are with copying, I don't know, 431 map files onto your phone to cover Victoria at 1 to 25,000 and putting them in the right folder and things like that.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I mean, that's because I have used Avenza, and when I know that I'm traveling to a particular area, then that's just how I do it bit by bit through there. So, and I kind of try to download the maps in a slightly larger area than what I think I'm going to be going into, just in case I go a little bit off piste.
Yes.
And I lose signal. But I mean that has worked for me. So I was just wondering, because I'm not here for like a tutorial, I guess, but I am very much a noob when it comes to this kind of software. So I'm interested in things like I don't even know if the software can pick up out of maps, like if you can search for stuff. So if I can highlight walking tracks or ruins or things like that, because as far as I'm aware, at least with the Avenza thing, it doesn't do that. It shows you the maps, and within the Avenza software, if you put all of, say, your maps together, all the GetLostMaps in what they call a collection, it will automatically change the maps over. It'll as you go through the borders.
Yes, that's right.
Those map extents.
Yeah.
And so that's nice. But I just didn't know if there was like maybe OziExplorer had some way of if it can read the map data, so I can kind of, I don't know, do a search for walking tracks or campsite or whatever it is, and it would kind of highlight and bring that out of the maps.
So there's OziExplorer, you can use there's a search file that you can put in it. I can't remember what it's called. It's a name search, I think. So it's this name search here, this thing that's just popped up on the right. This works on your phone as well. So that's a separate data file, a name search file. This is also on the website. You can download this if you want. It's basically, I don't know, 5,500 names of things. You won't be able to find walking tracks, but you might be able to find a particular walking track if you know the name of a particular, like this Macmillan's walking track. So I don't know if Macmillan's walking track is on here or not. Let's look out. Yeah, the walking track isn't on here, but these lookouts, spur, rock, whatever, it's good for finding a hut or a campsite with a particular name or a town or whatever. It depends on the app. They're all a bit different as to what they do.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, and I remember, I mean, we've had a number of conversations on track ranger support, right? But I actually ended up switching to Aussie. I mean, I've been using Aussie as well, but I mean, now I'm all OziExplorer because of your map. So there you go.
Yeah, I find it easy enough to use. It's really just about copying stuff onto the right folder on your phone. That's the hardest part about it. And the rest of it is easy enough. But it will only work on Android or PC, obviously. I used to use a UMPC before tablets were a thing, an ultra mobile PC, which is basically just a fat little laptop with no keyboard. Before it was a prototype of a tablet back in the day. In the 90s, I had one of those that I used to map with. This is an example of an old map, an old scan of a map, but it's got a hut marked here. There's no hut there. I still don't know what that hut was ever called, if anybody knows, but there used to be a hut there apparently. I've been there. It's a nice spot to camp. There's no hut.
I just thought that way, yeah. Interesting.
No idea. But looking through old maps is the other place that I find data.
Yeah.
Old scans of maps. And then I'll manually put stuff in.
It's impressive. I mean, seriously, this it's really, really impressive what you're doing. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really have much more questions, really. I mean, unless Heath or Gary or Jeff or the other guys have.
Oh no, I've just been listening, and it's good. It's pretty impressive what you've got there. So, I'm not an Aussie person, so I'm a HEMA person, but HEMA shits me. But you know, it's the devil that you know, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got HEMA maps. Like I will use them like to see whether they've got something. Where's my HEMA? I'll have HEMA in here somewhere.
Yeah, we saw it before with the
there's some HEMA.
high country.
Yeah, so I've got this. This is the HEMA of the high country. So I know what the competitors have got on the maps, for example. What's here. And I've had this for a while, so I used this before I made my map. So I was using HEMA, but I couldn't use only HEMA, which is the problem.
Because the problem with HEMA is it only goes in so far. And
well, this is it. It's zoomed in. It doesn't have
when you like when I'm doing tracks, I've got to zoom in all the way and use the Nokia Here maps.
Yeah,
I like that track. I'm actually Chrome out mine. I'm just sorry, I had to say I like that track. I like through that area.
This is Chrome out mine track.
Yeah.
But I don't mind HEMA maps. It's just that they're a bit more of a. I mean, they're not a topographical type map. It is actually a topographical map technically. It's got contours on it, but it's designed more like a touring map, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yes. I like to go right down. I like to look at when I'm driving along. I like to look at the map and see where I am and know pretty much close to where I'm going to turn.
Yep.
And sort of HEMA doesn't do that for me. You know, you've got to go right in, and then you're not even using HEMA maps. Then you're using Nokia stuff that they support. Yeah. So just having that extra level of zoom, does help a lot.
I use all of the maps. I don't just use these maps. I use like I mean, you can see how many layers I've got. I'll flip through between them depending on what I'm trying to do, and I'll flip in and out depending on what I want. I mean, here I've got 2 different chromite mine tracks. I assume this one is actually real and that one is not. I assume that could be an old alignment of chromite mine track, and this purple one might be a more recent alignment. But having said that, I mean, does it matter? If I'm driving along, it probably doesn't make that much difference.
No, it doesn't. And like HEMA's stuff, I've driven. I don't know how many times I've driven along, and I'm not on their map. I'm not on the road. I'm off it doing something else and you sort of look at where the road is, and look at where they think the road is, and you go, "There's never a road up that hill."
Yes,
that's quite common of you, though, Heath. Right? I mean, you'll find you going, "Where's Heath from?"
So I'm also very impressed with what you've done here. So I've been Aussieing from pretty early days in CEs. I've had a 7-inch, a number of 7-inch CEs that are set up for people, and I did an Android, which someone knocked off out of my car. So I haven't gone back to Android yet. So I think, and I've got a stack of maps. So from knowing various people, I became the map gatherer for amongst a group of friends. So I find it interesting to go from the 25 thou original, well, from the early Vic Fire maps, and they mightn't be the best at everything, but then often they'll have a track that doesn't exist anymore. So you can go looking for those missing bits of track. So much like you're talking about, just panning through maps to work out what have I got that tells me I see a track here. Have I got a map that shows me where that goes? Is it just going nowhere, or did it used to go somewhere? And as you say, occasionally, often those tracks are, if they've closed it, as in they don't want you there anymore, then they make it not too easy to see. Need some weather or something interesting happens sometimes, and you realise, there's where that kicks off from, and you can go down and pick up a few more scratches. So I'm very impressed with what you're doing here. I'll certainly be jumping in and having a look more. Yep, these guys.
Yes, that's an old fire map. This one here. This is an old
there you go. How's that? Is it an old one?
That's an old big map, fire map there.
Yeah.
Which is, it's interesting. I find it for the same reason. I find it really interesting. One, because it's got stuff on it that other things don't have anymore, because these are getting pretty old. Like there's an old hut. And that hut I can't remember if that's there or not now. Probably if I turn this on, ruin. See, there you go. So that's actually a ruin there now. But I probably only knew that was there from this map, and then I went and looked for it, and then found that it's not there, so I marked it as a ruin. But yeah, so I find it really interesting looking at the old maps from that perspective as well, because I get stuff off them that I couldn't get any other way.
Yeah, just amazing what you've done. Well, the amount of effort is hard to comprehend. I know for the bit I do how much time I can spend doing things. So, yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's,
agree.
Another takeaway, Tom, I guess, at least for me, is that because I've used your maps a couple of times, is that if I go out and use these maps and I find something that is completely different to what's marked on there, I'll make more of a point now of noting my location and making sure that when I get back, I'll shoot you a note to say, hey, I was out here and it's not what it is anymore.
Yeah, for sure. The track ends here and doesn't go past this point anymore. Or
I had a look before on the live maps, and I can see some tracks out near the club property that you can't go down, but they're marked on the map like normal maps. So
and
stuff like that. Improvement. That's all good. Awesome.
Yeah, this particular spot, I know I haven't been down this spot since about 1990. I've been down this track in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. I got bogged somewhere around here, so I should go, because it's really steep, and I should go back down there to see how steep whether it really is steep or it's just my memory and my old troopy that made it feel steep. But I certainly had to winch up it in the snow. So that was back in the day before this track was seasonally closed as well. So I remember camping up here and watching wombats walk past with snow on their backs and stuff. Camping on the track.
Good memories.
Yeah, I missed that a bit back when this hut was still there. I think too back in those days.
Oh yeah.
Jameson Ski Club hut. It's now that's nothing. It's just a pile of rocks and burnt tin now. But nice view.
I think another thing that for me says how interesting this has been is it feels like 30 minutes. In fact, we've taken a bit of your time. So
I'm sorry, I've taken too much of your time. So I get carried away.
No. Thank you. I mean, I'm just blown away, right? I mean, and thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, that's and Gary. I mean, as a previous president, I guess you can represent us all, right?
Yeah. No, it's been very, very interesting. And contrasting what I do with what I use a HEMA and use spatial vision maps of Victoria. But I'm going to explore this a lot more now.
Yeah, and I mean, just if you run them on the side, I mean, they don't cost anything, so it doesn't cost you anything to download them all probably, and you can just run them on the side and have an extra layer of data.
Yep.
We've used them and they're amazing. They're absolutely great. I'm blown away by what you've done. So. Amazing job, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Tom, I was just going to ask, you put a tablet in your vehicle just recently. Where did you acquire that from, or what?
Yeah, so this is it looks like a tablet. It's actually it's a head unit for this. I just got this on eBay. It costs $140, and it's an Android. You can get them cheaper than that too, but I got one with 2 gigabytes of RAM just to make it a bit quicker, because the other one I had was ridiculously slow. You'd sort of scroll it and it'd wait a bit, and then you'd make a cup of tea and come back, and then it had moved. So that was my $100 one. So I've gone right up in the world, and now I've got $140 one, which is this one.
If that's a head unit, what does that mean?
Well, it replaces your stereo. So this is in the spot of my stereo. My stereo is not there. I've taken my whole stereo out, and this is bolted into the same place that the stereo was, and that's how it's mounted. It's mounted like with brackets into the double DIN hole in the dash where the stereo used to be, and it's got a radio and stuff built into it, so it takes the whole place of your stereo.
Tom, do you mind? I'm actually considering doing something like that. Do you mind if I shoot you an email to get where you bought it from? Or?
Yeah, I can send you a link for the one that I bought. I haven't used it. It still says trial there because I took this picture a few days ago and I'd only just installed it. It seems to be, I mean, it's better than my old one was, and it's got a bigger screen. It's a bit messy, but the rest of my cars, I mean, doesn't stand out because the rest of my cars will be messy as well. But
it's a very busy dash.
Someone who was a bit more aesthetic could probably install it in a way that made it look prettier than I did. But it's a pretty functional truck, the Patrol. Yeah, I can certainly tell you the one that I bought. It's I'll give you a link on eBay to it. But there's lots of other ones that'll do a similar sort of job. Just Android head unit just means like a car stereo. That's all.
Yeah, no, I'm with you now. Yeah,
and all the speakers, like the normal speakers, they just plug in. I attach the wires into the back of it so that it plays my stereo, and it takes my Bluetooth phone calls and all the rest of the stuff for modern stereo does.
Yeah, cool.
Very good.
Yeah, but thanks. I mean, I know we're running way over, but I mean, Tom, seriously, thank you so much. Yeah, and I know it's extremely busy these days and all that, right? So, but I must just say thank you so much for taking the time, and that's definitely learned quite a bit today. So, yeah,
no worries.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom.
Definitely, thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Greatly appreciate it.
And thanks for organising, Jürgen.
That's all good.
Well done, mate.
Now, Jürgen, you got to do a course on OziExplorer now.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that, but I think we have to do that. But again, thanks, Tom. But again, we'll be in touch, and if there's anything that the club can contribute with, or at least be part of, I mean, let us know. That's
Any tips, any data, any corrections, just send them through. Any ideas?
Yeah, we'll do an article in the mag and you know, make a few shout outs and call outs. All good.
That'd be good.
No worries. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. That was good. Good one, mate. Went well.